Hi everyone, my name's Steph and I'm the founder of the Butterfly Princess Sending Initiative. You probably see many of my other videos if you're a regular follower of my Facebook page for Princess Butterfly Princess Initiative. Now this is a new series. It kind of links in that if you saw my two-part series with Rachel Evans a few weeks ago, we did a mini-series all about home education, self-directed education, but today this is a launch of a brand new series with Heidi Steele, which we're going to be talking about home education again, but what she does, and also in the next coming episodes, we're going to be doing all about play, video games, and how children can learn sensory learning needs and everything, and also about children's books, because she told me before that she has a degree in children's literature, because I'm an avid reader of thrillers, and like when I was younger I read children's books, so that will be really interesting. That will be a really interesting vlog for me, being an avid reader and a fan of classical literature like Jane Eyre and things, Winnie the Poohs and stuff. But today we're just going to do a little introduction into what Heidi does and how she educates the children. So I will pass you on to Heidi now.
Excellent.
So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Steph. I'll introduce myself and obviously talk about who I am and what I do. And then, like, if you have any questions, Steph, you just jump in, stop me, because I'll just carry on. So you stop me when you need to and ask me any questions, because I know that I know you've done this series with Rachel Evans, and I watched the first one. And me and Rachel both home educate our children, and we both adopt a similar philosophy, in fact the same philosophy and a similar style of home educating our children. And I know for some people that can be even just the idea of home educating, like taking your children out of school and taking responsibility for your child's education, is like a brand new idea. Like some people don't even know that that's possible or that it's legal. So I'm just going to start there and say it is possible and it's totally legal. And so I really encourage you just to listen on, especially if you've got children that maybe don't fit into mainstream school very comfortably, and you're, maybe there's some things that you're not quite happy about, or your children are finding really tricky. This could be an option for you. So my name's Heidi. So as Steph said, my name's Heidi Steele. I'm actually a former teacher. I trained to be a teacher about 20 years ago. And I spent 10 years in mainstream school, particularly working with early years children. So nursery, reception, year one. And then later in my career, I encompassed like the whole of primary age children. So that's up until year 6. So that's my background. And then when it came to my own children, we decided that we would home educate them. And my experience as a teacher and what I knew about schools, and also my training, so sort of my university training and my teacher training, very much led us to that decision. I became quite disillusioned with the education system, and we chose not to send our children. So what I do now is I am an unschooling advocate, which is probably maybe a new word to some of you. It's an educational philosophy that you can use when you are home educating. So there's loads and loads of different ways you can home educate, and that is the beauty of it. Like once you decide to home educate, you choose how you're going to do that and what that looks like in your family. And we choose this approach called unschooling, and I am now an sort of an unschooling advocate. That's what I talk about. That's what I help other people with. So I've got lots of things going on in there. So I'll tell you about those in a minute. But primarily, I am a parent to 4 always unschooled children, which basically means my children have never been to school, and they are at home, living their lives and having fun, and it's great. So they're 14, currently aged 14, 12, 9, and 7. So they're all school age children.
So varied ages then of...
Yeah, so technically I'm not overly very good at what school year they would be in, but I've basically got 2 that would be in secondary school and then 2 that would be in primary school. So we've got we've educated them all the way through primary, and now my eldest 2 are well into their secondary school years. So we've basically been doing this for over 10 years now. That's what we've been doing. And as I said, I talk about unschooling a lot, and I support people who want to know more about unschooling or who are actively unschooling their children. And I do that mostly on Facebook. I've got a Facebook group called Live, Play, Learn. And that is my media handle for Instagram and Twitter and YouTube. And it comes with like a profile picture of me wearing a mustard yellow sort of knitted cowl. It's actually a cowl, but it looks like a scarf. And and then it's in front of a rainbow. It's actually in my daughter's bedroom. So in front of a rainbow.
You also have a podcast as well, is that correct, where you have guest speakers and...
Yep, that's right. So I release a monthly episode on my podcast, which you can find on YouTube and podcasting platforms, and that's actually called Unschooling Conversations. So I speak to other parents who are actively unschooling their children. I speak to people in the world of academia who write about self-directed education and what that looks like, and the outcomes of young people who follow a self-directed educating route. I speak to loads of really interesting people. It's actually one of the real joys of what I do, connecting with other people and us talking really passionately about what we love doing. So that's what the podcast's all about. And we talk about loads of different things. We talk about teenagers. We talk about learning. We talk about play. We talk about I've talked about racism with one lady who unschools her children, and her passion is talking about racism, anti-racism, actually, more specifically, anti-racism work. There's lots going on there. I've recorded more than I've released, so sometimes I forget which ones I've released and which ones I've still got to come. But that's one of the real joys of what I'm doing at the moment. But for parents particularly, you can find me at Live, Play, Learn on Facebook, and then I sort of direct to everything else from there that I'm doing. So that's the easiest place. And I live in the UK, so I live in England, if that's important to people. I live in the southeast of England with my husband, my 4 children. We've got 4 chickens, 2 cats, and we got a puppy, a lockdown puppy, who's a menace. But we love him.
So it's it sounds quite of like a, what's the word, quite of a lively household then.
I was wondering what word you were going to choose then, Steph. Yeah. I was going lively, chaotic, fun. I feel like we don't really sleep. There's always something going on or something to do. Yes, so that's us, and that's that's what we do. And as I said, we sort of came to this route because of my background in my training in child development, my passion for watching children genuinely learn through their own play, and all this information that I had been given in my studies, and background in early years and how to support children. Yeah, and then there was a bit of a mismatch between that and what actually happens in schools, and I became a bit disillusioned, as I said before.
I was going to ask, was there a particular reason why you decided to take this route? I mean, when I did the series with Rachel Evans, the reason she decided to homeschool her children was because they had PDA. So have your children got any like learning disabilities, or was it just a genuine idea that you wanted home educate because you weren't a huge fan of the schooling system?
Yeah, so it started from there. It started because I wasn't a fan of the school system, and it started because I really I looked at my eldest at the time, who's obviously 4, that age when children traditionally go into school. So so one of the things we knew was that my eldest wasn't emotionally ready to be parted from us for like 6 hours. And one of the things, 6 hours a day. And one of the things that he will now continue to tell you at the age of 14 is that he loves being at home and he loves being with his family. Although I do want to point out that home educators don't just spend their time at home. I just put that one out there right now. But he has this security in those foundational relationships. And yeah, so initially I knew that academically he would be okay. I already knew that he was good. That was apparent to us. He was bright, he was alert, he was articulate, he ticked all those developmental boxes that health visitors liked. So I knew that he was okay in that respect. So I guess we just prioritized his sort of mental health, really. We weren't in a position where, we were in a position where we could continue to have him at home. And so we took that opportunity to say, okay, we're going to prioritize that. But one of the other things initially that I wanted to do was move away from school type learning, and I wanted to put into practice this idea that children are born with an innate ability to learn, and that actually we don't need to interfere with that. We don't need to put our own agenda on that. So we don't have to stipulate what they learn and when they learn it and how they learn it. That actually our children have this organic ability to learn, to develop, to grow, to be curious, to ask questions, to discover new things and develop skills. And we had decided that was what we were going to do. That was the route or the philosophy that we were going to adopt. So initially it was our decision was very driven by the fact that I didn't particularly like what happened in schools, and coupled with the fact that I knew that my child would initially struggle with, at the age of 4, would struggle with that. As it turned out, to answer the second part of your question, as it turned out, as we had subsequent children, we did discover much later on that had our children been in school, they would have been diagnosed with various, as you said, learning disabilities. They would be classed as learning disabilities. So initially, when my second child came up to that age of entering school, I already knew that if he went to school, he would be labelled as the naughty one, and I didn't want that for him. He was energetic. he was well, he was just energetic. Just put it that way. He was just energetic, like all the time. And I just knew that he wouldn't adapt to like the confines of a classroom, and he would just be labelled naughty. And I didn't want that for him, because we already had changed our perspective, and we didn't see him as being naughty. We just saw him as exploring the world in a way that suited him and his needs. Yeah, and then my third child, she has significant, I guess I would call them significant, I mean it's comparative, but significant medical needs, which within the perimeters of school would have really caused her to be singled out. Plus there would have been a lot of pressure, I think, on us as parents to intervene, medically intervene in ways that were sort of contrary to our underlying principles about how we should treat children, and not what we would have considered the best way to sort of proceed with addressing her condition. So in terms of choosing to home educate her, that worked out really well. It would have been a different story if she'd been to school. And then I'm almost convinced my fourth would thrive actually in school. But sort of by this time, we've sort of carved out this family lifestyle that really suited us. And we had moved on a lot in our thinking, like from considering our children's individual experiences and learning journeys, to also sort of questioning the whole system, actually. So she currently is home educated too. She's at home with us too.
So it seems to me, Heidi, that there's been sort of like a number of contributing factors that made you come to the decision of home education for all your children, because obviously we know that being in school, it's very structured days, it's very disciplined, and obviously in schools, no matter how old your child is, or if you're in primary or secondary school, there is a lot of bullying and discrimination, and regardless of, because I've been bullied quite a lot in school, so I know what it feels like. And when you said that your daughter has various medical needs, I suppose that would make her more of a target for that bullying and discrimination, as I was because of my disability. And I completely understand how you as a family came to that conclusion that home education was the best route for you and your family, really.
Yeah, and it's interesting because obviously she still has those needs. You know, those needs don't go away. And so the same with my son, who's, you know, energetic and very talkative and passionate about the things that he loves. In a different context, by which I really mean the context of school, those things become incredibly difficult if you don't comply to, or if you don't fit into the system that they've created. And so the interesting thing is that when you take children out of that system, obviously those medical issues don't go away. My son's personality doesn't go away, but the community that we live in, because they live by the same principles that we are living by, the children in our community don't see differences as being a reason to, for want of a better word, bully someone. Their differences are normal. Differences are just part of, you know, everyone's different. everyone's different. Everyone's got different hobbies. Everyone's got different passions. Everyone's a different height. You know, everyone. Some people are shy, and some people are really extroverted, and those things just become part of like a rich tapestry of who we are, rather than a reason to divide and segregate people, which is one of the things that the school system does. It manages to say, this person is different, you know, so for example, maybe you've got a child who's dyslexic. This child is dyslexic. This child can't read. I then need to remove them from their peer group, their classroom and their friends, because they need extra support. And you've created a divide, and you've segregated that person from the rest of the group, and you've made them different. And you've said, it's an implicit thing. You're saying that person needs extra help. You are therefore better than that person, and that gives you power over that person. Which,
I mean, I know Heidi from I've got a lot of personal experiences because I've been segregated in school, you know, bullied horrendously because of my disability. In my early childhood, I was bullied horrifically for many, many years, and that's the reason why I'm so passionate about what I do. And I know this is going off on a bit of a tangent, really, but it's something that I've always wanted to do, and I don't know if you could help me, or if you know of anyone who you chat to. But when you were talking, said you were talking to a lady about racism on your podcast. You say, I'd really like to do a series with people or anyone about my interests, because I'm like very interested. Like, I'm into reading literature, the classic novels like Jane Eyre, Wuthering Heights. I'm also into history, like the Tudor period, travel, different civilization. You know, I'm a big history buff and a big reading buff, and to do a series like that would not only be like educational, but it's like giving the opportunity for people to get to know me as a person. So if I could do any of that with you, depending on what your children are into and what you teach your children, then I'd be happy to do that with you or any of your people you know in your podcast or anything. Sorry that was going off a tangent, but I really wanted to do something based on my own interest, but it's finding the right people to do it with, you know, just having a genuine chat about, you know, Jane Eyre, for example, what it's about and what that means to you, or why I'm interested in, like, the Tudor period, for example. I would love to do something like that.
Which leads really nicely, actually. I went off on a tangent, and you might have done, but really it leads really nicely into what we do as unschoolers. So the how of our home educating, and the how of our home educating is all those things that you've said you really enjoy and you want to do more of, and you want to connect with people that have the same passions as you. Well, that's what unschooling is. Unschooling is allowing our children to do the things that they love, and to keep doing the things they love, and to connect with other people that are doing the same as them and have the same passions as them. And that's what unschooling is: supporting our children doing the things that they want to do. And it primarily looks nothing like school, which scares people, I think. It does. And they have loads of questions, you know, which is why I do what I do, why I support parents who have all those questions. When you suddenly say, you know, our children choose what they do, and they choose when they do it, and they choose how long they do it for, and then come all the you know, all the questions about how that actually works. But it's based on this idea that our children are fully and utterly capable of learning organically, and with the right support, they can flourish. So there is an element where, as the adults in their lives, we are supporting them and we're facilitating and we're helping them. but primarily our children actually become the ones in the driving seat, so to speak. They're the ones that do the choosing, and then we're there to help them. And it is completely the opposite of school, and everything that you would consider to be sort of related to school education is not needed in unschooling. Sometimes you'll hear people call it self-directed education. That's another term that you might people might use, or things like autonomous education, or life learning. So they're sort of slightly interchangeable terms. They're terms used when the children themselves are the ones in the driving seat, the ones who are doing the ones who are in charge. They're in charge of their own lives and in charge of their own learning. So what we do on a day-to-day basis is we make space. Basically, we make space in our lives, in our home, in our family, and in our community, because we have a social network of other unschoolers and other home educators. And we make space in our lives for the things our children want to do, and whatever those things are, because it's not, my children didn't learn about the Great Fire of London when they were 7, like school children. They don't. Whatever children are learning in school, my children are probably learning about other things and other subjects and other topics that interest them. And then we make sure they have access to things, so resources and information that they need. We jump in alongside them and learn with them, show an interest in what they're doing. But as I said, so like what my 14-year-old is doing is completely different to, other 14-year-olds in England. But not only is it different to what other children are doing in schools, it's different to his other sort of 14-year-old friends, because they all have they have some crossover in what they're doing and things that they like. But it's so individualized that, his friends have got other things going on as well, and he's got separate things as going on. And all of my children, again, like sometimes there's a crossover. So sometimes they all might have a period of time where they all want to play Pokemon Go. That was quite popular. I don't know if you remember that, and my older two still play it. So they might have a crossover where they're all interested in the same thing and they want to do the same thing at the same time. But they also have their own personalities and their own choices and their own passions going on.
And I like the fact that, like within schools, you know what I mean, you go on school trips, but and I think that's very limited. And this is another one that I want to explore with someone or some people, that I want to do vlogs as well where I'm out and about. So like where things have really happened. So, for example, if you want to learn about Beatrix Potter, you may take a visit to the Lake District. If you want to learn about the Titanic, you may want to go to the museum in Belfast or Liverpool. Or if you want to learn about the Vikings, you might want to visit York. And these are the things that I'm really interested in exploring with my vlogs. I really hope people will be able to reach out to me saying, we'll do this with you, because these are the things I'm really passionate about. I mean, I'm 28 now, but I love learning. I've always got my head in a book, or I've got an app, or I'm reading a newspaper or a magazine or a book. So I love to learn, and just to really explore the process of learning about different things that are interesting to me, and having that conversation, I think would really, because you asked me before what sort of age groups and audience is do my vlogs reach out. I said a lot of it's adults, meaning a lot of adult conversation, but children will not learn that in a few years' time. But I just think the best way for me to reach out to a more younger audience is to explore different topics that I'm interested in and having a really deep conversation with someone who's a professional in that field or who knows a lot about that field. So I'm really hoping that's something we can achieve through doing our partnership as well.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying about the people that are listening now and what they can get from this, but also this idea that you said you're 28 and you're still learning stuff, and life's still fascinating, and there's so much out there to learn. And one of the gifts we're giving our children, hopefully, is this idea that learning never stops, learning never ends. We don't go to school for 12 years and then bang, we get a certificate and we've learned everything, and now you can go into the wide world and you're you're all good, you've got your stamp and you're all good to go. And it doesn't work like that in reality. In reality, there's so much to learn in the world. The learning never ever stops, and that's one of the things I think that as home educators and unschoolers we are giving our children. And that's one of the reasons why one of the synonyms that's used for unschooling is life learning. It's because we're learning from life, and that is continuous forever, until the end of our days. We don't stop learning. People, there's people who get degrees when they're in their 90s, and there's people who change careers when they're in their 40s or find something completely different that they want to do, that they've spent the previous 40 years doing, because they're learning, the learning never ends. And like you said, we one of the ways that us as adults in an unschooling family help our children is to organize things like those trips, because our 5, 6, 7-year-old can say, oh, I'm really interested in the Titanic, although they might not actually verbalize it. It might just be that they're always got their nose in a book about the Titanic, so you are in tune with that. You can really, you can see, and they build the Titanic out of Lego, or they're building the Titanic out, or they're drawing the Titanic, and so as the adult you go off and you think, well, how can I engage them more in this, or what else could we do that would broaden that understanding for them? And as you say, one of the things you might do is in fact, I know people that have gone to Belfast and explored that topic further by doing a trip. My children, my boys in particular, my elder boys, when they were younger, were really into a video game. I don't know if you call it a video game, but a game called Minecraft, which is still incredibly popular. The aspect in particular that my eldest liked about Minecraft were the different things that you could mine, so the different types of stones that you could mine. So we took him to various museums where you could actually go and see these stones that were, pictured in a video game, and we actually went and saw them. And we also bought him a case of different rocks and geology books as well, as a way of supporting and facilitating that interest for him. So it's really, like I said before, it's really varied and really unique to our children, and things that our children have this option to say no as well. So when we say to them, I've got you this geology book, or we leave them a geology book, if they're not interested in it, it doesn't matter. It's not the time for that right now. That's not what they need, and that's not what they want. So unlike schools where they have set curriculums, and that is what you're doing, there's no option. That is what you're doing. And plans, and I don't know, target setting. I don't know if this rings a bell with you, Steph. So like target setting and goals, all that sort of stuff becomes really surplus and unnecessary when we when we live in the real world of learning. So sometimes we can look at, you know, our learning as adults. What are we learning, or what have I learned recently? You know, I taught myself to crochet. You know, maybe you've got this interest in Beatrix Potter. You know, what do you do to find out more about that? Well, that's the same process that we sort of apply to our children. You know, what is it that they want to do? What do they want to learn? How do they want to do that? And it just becomes part of our life, our normal life of living in the real world, you know, answering their questions when they have them, reading books, taking them places, connecting with other people that are experts. That's something you mentioned, Steph, when you talked about, you know, going places, connecting with people who really, you know what they're talking about when you're talking about geology, or, you know, have an expertise in dance, if that's, you know, if you've got a child that's particularly into dance or gymnastics or music, you know, finding people who are equally passionate about it and can share that passion with your children. And a lot of the go on.
And the thing that I find really annoying about in like the schooling sector and like the college sector is that everyone thinks that you've got to go to university after college because, you know, if you don't go to university, then your life's not worth anything, you know, you'll be on this scrap heap. And this whole common myth that people from low income backgrounds or less privileged backgrounds will do much worse in their education than somebody, you know, who's come from a privileged background. They've probably had both parents living together, and that's a myth because I'm from a single parent household. My parents split up when I was very young, and you know, I've got a disability, so that was against me, but I've still been very successful in life, you know, and you know, just because you haven't gone on to uni and stuff doesn't mean that you're gonna not be successful in life. And it's this whole notion of what is success, and success is whatever you plan on making it to be.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like, you know, you talked about our self-worth, and a lot of people that have been through the education system, which is most of us, let's face it, you know, it's most of our society have been through the education system. Our whole self-worth gets really caught up in this idea of like, how many GCSEs have I got? How many A levels have I got? Do I have a degree? How much money am I earning? And it's awful. It affects our lives, it affects our mental health, it affects our physical health, because these things are all connected. And we lose sight of the fact that people, human beings, are worthy and have value because they're alive, because you are. And it goes back to almost what we were talking about earlier about that hierarchy of who are we segregating and why, who are we pulling out aside and pointing out that they're different, and what is the impact of what we're doing when we do that. You know, we're creating a hierarchy by which we're saying, I am worth more than you because I earn more money. I am worth more than you because I've got a degree or a doctorate or A levels, or because, or simple things, or even more simple things like I come from I come from a one-parent family, or you come from a one-parent family and I don't. I come from a two-parent family, so I therefore am worth more than you. And it's a huge lie that affects our self-worth, our self-confidence, our mental health. It's something that or one of the things that I've become more aware of since we began our unschooling journey, since we started on this road of saying, well, it's okay for our children to have different interests, and therefore it's okay for our children to be different, and different from each other, not just be different because we're home educating from the rest of the world, but in our community, it's okay for our children to have these differences, whatever they are. and to understand that that doesn't make anybody more worthy than anybody else. And to, we use terms like being inclusive, that everybody should have a voice when they come, when they come together, and how to organize a space so that everyone has a voice, even if it takes somebody a little bit longer to voice what they want to say, or even if that person isn't as articulate as somebody else, creating room where they are comfortable, making people comfortable so that they can, so that we can value them and show them that they are worthy and they have worth. I think we went a bit deep there, Steph. Or maybe that was just me.
Oh, no, it was just when you get into these conversations, you start to lose track of what. But I think we've touched on some really, really interesting things, and I think it will lead nicely into future vlogs, maybe.
Yes, it will. It will lead really nicely into future ones. I mean, you mentioned briefly about exams and exams being, something that, sets people apart, and, we think that that's what we have to do. And nowadays that's just not true. It's just, there are so many ways into the world of adulthood, and how we're going to, or how our children, or how we are going to manage our lives, and how we're going to contribute, to the wider society, and what that looks like. And it doesn't necessarily have to be through the route of taking exams. And I think for us, our priority, so the end of schooling is the exam, isn't it? That's what you're aiming for,
the pinnacle,
the pinnacle thing. And although that is an option for us, if my children want to take exams, we can access those, and that is an option. It's not our aim, and it's not our primary goal. I think it's a bit hard to maybe voice what our goals are, but I think at the end of the day, if my children were happy in their adult life, that would be what that's what would make me most satisfied about what we're doing. If my children are able to do what they want to do and achieve the things they want to achieve, and they are happy, then that would be a more appropriate goal for us than saying at the end of this I want my child to achieve 10 GCSEs, for example. That sort of prioritizing mental health and self-worth, I think. Which I feel like we're doing, because that's what we're prioritizing now.
Okay.
So we're, by prioritizing that now, we're saying that's what's important. I thought it might be worth mentioning that one of the things I wanted to be clear about when we were talking, because of your work with the SEND community particularly, was that and our lifestyle, our unschooling lifestyle, means that we can prioritise mental health, and we can prioritise physical health, and we can prioritise things that support our children and aren't causing our children harm or stress or pressure, which for us means that practically in our lives, if my children have a bad night's sleep, for example, they can sleep it off the next morning. I don't have to get my children out of bed to go to school, for example.
That's when sometimes when children haven't had a good night's sleep and they're in school and they can be really ratting, like oh, I don't want to get out of bed, and you practically have to drag them out of bed. And so as a home educator, you don't have that thought. They can just sleep it off and then get up whenever they want to get up, and then
you're not put in a position where you're having to choose between your child's health and you know, a low attendance record. You know, so talking of which, I was thinking about, you know, when my daughter has medical appointments, you know, there's no shame in my daughter having medical appointments. We don't have this, I don't know if you had this when you were at school, Steph, but this sort of attendance awards, you know, so there's no shame in missing attendance and missing school. You know, if your child, so my two younger ones, my two daughters, both have particular dietary requirements, and my third, you know, has this medical condition that I was talking about, that she needs medical attention during the course of the day, and it becomes much easier to implement those things and to deliver those things because you're not having to work it around somebody else's schedule, the school schedule. So things like that become, I mean, they don't go away, and I'm not going to pretend that those things are easy, but they become easier to manage than if you're having to meet somebody else's criteria and somebody else's timetable. You can weave that in, you can create your own pattern of what that looks like. You know, I was thinking about my daughter in particular has quite high anxiety, and I can spend time with her. I can spend a lot of time with her, supporting her in that anxiety and calming her through a situation, you know, in response to how she's feeling and in response to what she's going through, instead of feeling a pressure and a need to complete a task or move to another area in the school because we're now doing PE, or, you know, according to someone else's timetable, according to an external pressure.
Like in a classroom, because in a school, we could have like 30 children, and then the teacher's got to plan in mind the needs of 30 children, whereas you can just focus on one child at a time. So your complete focus is on that one child and nobody else. So
yeah, and it just gives us that opportunity to say, I'm prioritizing this human being instead of prioritizing a timetable or a curriculum or we have to be in assembly now. So yeah, I just think I think there's a lot of scope for people who find the pressure of school and the expectation of school on them, and the detrimental effect that then has on our relationship with our children. Because you're pulled, you do as parents, you're pulled between what my children need and what they're feeling, and you know, what I want to do for them, and then this external pressure saying, you know, really we want them to be in full-time attendance, really they need to be, you know, doing PE now, and they need to be, and we can't meet that dietary need in school. So I just think there's a lot of factors that can be removed once you are within the setting of home educating, and it's important to be explicit about that, and so people don't feel that they need to replicate school at home, which, as I said before, unschooling is not school at home. It's the complete
difference,
completely different. But I thought it would be useful just to explicitly mention some examples of of how that works in the context of, you know, children who have, you know, specific needs.
Well, it's been really interesting, this introduction today. I hope that people have really enjoyed listening and found it really informative. I know I have, and I look forward to upcoming episodes.
So I think on the next one we're going to have, I'm just checking my notes, Steph. I think on the next one we were thinking that we would, I can't find them. We would, we would talk specifically about sort of send children and how to support them at home and what that might look like outside of school.
Yeah, so they're things, and also like children's literature coming up in upcoming episodes and playing stuff.